Hello friend, in today's video I'm going to share all about the new Tim Holtz Distress color Lost Shadow. It's a beautiful light cool gray color that fits in perfectly with the Distress palette. As always, it's available in all the regular formats, including the Distress ink, Distress Oxide ink, Distress Spray Stain, Distress Oxide Spray, Distress Paint, and Distress Embossing Glaze. When I got the new color, the first thing I did was create some swatches. I've done these same swatches for the last several new colors, and I've found it really helpful for getting to know the new color and how I might want to use it. On this one, I swatched the Distress ink using an ink smushing technique on the background, and then ink blending it onto the die cut. On this one, I used the Oxide ink and ink blended it around the outer edge, and then on the die cut, I spritzed it with some water to activate the Oxide. I also made swatches of hickory smoke, pumice stone, and black soot to show you a comparison of the colors. Here's a look at the card I made using Lost Shadow. I used both ink pads, the Distress Spray Stain, and the Embossing Glaze. Next up, I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of how I created it. The first thing I'm going to show you is how I created the background. I began with a piece of Distress watercolor paper cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and will be embossing it with the scrapbook.com Mosaic A2 die. Yep, you heard me correctly. I'm going to use the die to emboss. Here is the sandwich I used with my Sizzix fold-away. It also works with the switch. It's the base plate, scrapbook.com magic mat, silicone mat, paper, the die, and the top plate. If you have a different machine, please refer to your machine's instructions for the proper sandwich. Off camera, I've used this sandwich to emboss the paper, ran it through the machine twice for good measure, and here's what it looks like. Beautifully embossed. Now I'm going to add some color and grunge using embossing glaze. Here I'm taking an embossing ink pad and rubbing it over the surface of the paper. You don't need to push hard as you're just trying to get ink onto the raised areas, but if you do push harder and you get more ink, it's totally fine. Next up, I've placed the ink paper on top of a piece of folded printer paper, and I'm pouring the Lost Shadow embossing glaze over the paper. I then tap off the excess, and after doing this, I still feel like there is too much of the powder, so I'm using my finger to lightly wipe off some of it. I then return the excess powder to the jar. Here I'm using an embossing heat gun to melt the embossing powder. Make sure to let the heat gun warm up a little bit before you get started, and then make sure to keep it moving over the paper and avoid leaving it in one spot for too long. As things warm up, you'll see the magic start to happen as the embossing powder begins to melt and become shiny. Once all of the powder is melted, you're ready for the next step, the addition of a little grunge. For this step, I'm using a hickory smoke distress crayon, a stencil brush, and just a bit of water. I begin by coloring onto the embossed paper with the crayon and then use the brush to work the crayon into the embossed design and the cracks and crevices from the embossing glaze. You can use a tiny bit of water if needed to help move the color around a little easier. Continue working around the outer edge of the paper. I'm not going to bother with adding the crayon to the center area because I'm planning to cover it up anyway. Once you have the outer edge of the card covered with the crayon, tap your finger into some of the water that's still on your mat, or if you haven't used any, add just a tiny bit, and then lightly wipe your finger over the surface. I love how this gently removes some of the crayon while revealing the color that has gotten into the cracks and crevices. On this card, I'm going to be doing some die cutting, and I wanted to create a couple of pieces of custom colored paper to use. Here I'm using the ink smushing technique with a piece of Distress watercolor paper and the Lost Shadow Distress ink. I highly recommend working with watercolor paper for this technique because it can take the water. To do this technique, you smush the ink pad onto your craft mat, spritz it with a little water, and then smush your paper into the ink. You can use your finger to smear the ink around a little if you like before you begin, or you can just start smushing. Smush the paper into the ink, working to get ink over the entire paper, and then use your heat tool to dry the paper. Smush the paper again and repeat the process with the remaining ink. If there's not much ink left, feel free to add more. By repeating the smooshing, you will build layers of color, which really adds to the interest of the inked paper. Continue the process until you're happy with how the paper looks. Off camera, I use the same process with salvaged patina distress ink to create another panel of paper. Next up, I'm going to create the tag. This was die cut off camera from distress watercolor paper. I'm going to stamp on it using the script stamp from the Tim Holtz Entomology stamp set. Here I'm placing the tag into my MISTI. I keep a piece of black cardstock in my MISTI to help keep it a little more clean. As you can see, I have the tag shape traced onto the paper. Because the stamp is larger than the tag, I can't use the magnet, so I'm applying a bit of removable adhesive to the back side to help hold it in place. Next, I'm spraying the stamp with the Lost Shadow Distress Spray Stain. I then close the MISTI to stamp the image onto the paper. Because I'm using the spray as my ink, the image is not clear, which is the look I'm going for. You could totally get the same look by inking the stamp with a distress ink pad and then spritzing it with a bit of water before you stamp the image. After I stamped it the first time, I realized I wanted a little more color on the top and bottom edges of the tag, so I added more ink and restamped the image. After I stamped the image, I used my heat tool to dry the ink. Next, I'm inking the edges of it with a bit of Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink for a little contrast. I can then set this to the side and move on to the next layer. Now for the die cutting. I did all of this off camera. I used the Tim Holtz Tailored Die Set and die cut the top hat, jacket, and vest from the Lost Shadow ink smushed paper we created earlier, and the tie from the salvaged patina paper. I also used the Tim Holtz Adorned die set and the Scrapbook.com Butterflies 1 die set with the salvaged patina paper. I cut the whole reinforcers from the Lost Shadow paper using the Scrapbook.com nested tag die set. And lastly, I cut the shirt part from a piece of printer paper. I found that when I use regular cardstock, the collar doesn't fold down very easily, and this thinner paper gives it a little more of a crisp look. With all of the die cutting finished, it's time to begin assembling the jacket and top hat. There are crease lines on the shirt and the jacket that allow you to fold the paper and create the collar and lapel. I love the dimension this adds to the die cut. Once you fold the collar over, you can use a bone folder to really smooth it out. Next, I'm taking the jacket layer and folding the lapels and using the bone folder to help create the folds. Now I'm going to add a little texture to the hat and jacket and emboss them using the Tim Holtz Woven 3D embossing folder. Before doing this off camera, I spritzed the back side of the paper only so as not to activate the ink on the front of the paper, and then ran it through my die cutting machine. After I had embossed the hat and jacket, I'm going to highlight the texture by lightly rubbing the Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink pad over the die cuts. I'm using repositionable adhesive to help hold them in place while I do this. You can see how the slightly darker hickory smoke makes the embossed design pop. Next, I take a blending tool and apply Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink to the edges of the pieces. I also apply the same ink to the other hat layers and vest to darken them slightly and create a little more contrast. I then decided to add a little ink to the edges of the tie and the butterfly die cuts as well. Now that the inking is completed, it's time to start assembling the jacket and hat die cuts. Here I'm using Distress Collage Medium to adhere the various layers. I'm speeding up this section so you don't have to spend your time watching glue dry. You might notice me using some tweezers to hold the layers together while the glue dries. This is a great little trick when working with small pieces like this. Once I have the tie assembled, I use a pair of scissors to trim off the top portion before I adhere it to the jacket. I do admit I was struggling with getting the layers to adhere to the embossed hat section. That was not the glue's fault though, but my own, as I just wasn't using enough adhesive, so you'll see me adding more adhesive at times as well. As for the hole reinforcer on the tag, I used both sizes and adhered them together to add a little more dimension. With the die cuts assembled, it's time to adhere them to the tag. Here I'm using double-sided foam adhesive to give them a little bit of dimension. You could certainly use collage medium to adhere them if you are planning to mail your card or want to avoid the extra bulk from the foam tape. Once I got everything adhered to the tag, I grabbed the background and the swirl die cuts and began arranging how I wanted them positioned behind the tag. I cut one of them in half to add a little extra curl to the right side of the tag. To help hold the die cuts in place, I'm applying Easy Tear tape to the back side of the tag. I then remove the liner and place the tag on top of the flourishes and push down to help them stick to the tape. I then apply the extra flourish. To adhere the tag to the background, I'm using double-sided foam adhesive. This does add more dimension, which I personally love, but you could also use a different adhesive if you want to avoid the thickness this will add. The final touch for the card is the addition of a sentiment. I'm using this Choose Happy stamp from the scrapbook.com WordFetti Oh So Happy stamp set. They have 2 stamp sets with this awesome typewriter font, and there are a ton of great sentiments on both of them, so you'll have plenty of sayings to choose from to fit your specific card needs. I stamped the sentiment using Lost Shadow Oxide ink onto a piece of white cardstock. I then used my new favorite scissors, the Tim Holtz 9.5-inch non-stick scissors, to cut it into a strip. The long blade makes it easier to get a straight cut, although it's not quite as straight as using a paper trimmer. Once I trim it down to size, I ink the edges with a little Hickory Smoke Oxide ink, just using what was left over on my blending tool from my earlier inking. I then adhere the sentiment with a strip of foam adhesive. I didn't get it quite centered, so I just used the scissors to trim off the bit of adhesive that was hanging over the edge. And there you have it, the completed card using the new Tim Holtz Distress Color Lost Shadow. Thanks so much for watching. I'm truly grateful for you. I was wondering if you could do me a quick favor and subscribe to my channel or leave me a thumbs up or a comment. If you're feeling extra generous, I'd love for you to share about my channel with your friends. All of these things help out us YouTubers so much, and it would mean so much to me to have your support.